And joining us now on the debate, in the nation's capital, Eric Schiller, an engineer who was in the DRC during November's election. And with us here in studio, Mikhail Misakabo, a founding member of Pamoja. That's a charitable organization that rebuilds rural African communities. Thomas Kwasi Tieku, director of the New College's African Studies program at the University of Toronto. Ange Kalenga, member of the Women's Charitable Foundation, a celebration of women. And we welcome back Anita Vandenbeld, formerly of the National Democratic Institute. Okay, good to have you folks here at the table. I know we had you here and we had you here a couple of years ago, so it's good to see you two again. I want to start just with a little bit of background. So Michael Smith, if you would, let's bring up this map to remind everybody where it is we're talking about. This is the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country two-thirds the size of Europe. Second largest country in Africa, formerly a colony of Belgium. How miserable is it? It ranks 187th out of 187 countries on the International Human Development Index. Population of the DRC, more than 71 million people. We're talking about a country with more than 200 ethnic groups. The median age, 17.4 years. It is a very young country, but life expectancy, only 55 years. The official language is French, although there are 4 other dialects as well. And the religion is predominantly Christian. And why is the DRC such a source of misery for so many people? Well, the fact is, despite its poverty, it is incredibly rich in cobalt, copper, and the list goes on. Those are all of the things that mining companies around the world want to get their hands on in that country. Eric, let me start with you. You were, as I suggested off the top, in the DRC last November for the elections, and I wonder whether there's anything beyond what Anita told us in the first segment that you'd like to add that you saw or experienced while you were there.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I was over there with a group of about 100 people in a Quaker community. They were all local observers, and we should stress there were a lot of local observers during the election. And there were 5 of us Canadians. We were international election observers with this NGO. I was in a school complex. We had access to the results of 23 polling booths. And I was very impressed with the transparency and the clearness of the election, the counting, and the posting of the results. Now that's at the basic level. But as things went upwards, as the Congolese said, then things became more and more mysterious. There was a fair amount of tension in the streets because people were just not trusting the process. They were afraid of what would happen after the voting took place. So there were manifestations outside, there were
protests,
riot
demonstrations,
police, there was, and so on and so on, yeah. Right. So that is probably why Anita came by our polling booth, and that's where we met in Kinshasa.
You two saw each other while you were over there?
Met there, yeah.
You met while you were over there. Okay. Ange, how about you? We've heard a couple of different accounts now. Your understanding from having spoken to people over there, what's your understanding of how it went?
Well, when we do call our families in Kinshasa, they're telling us we've voted Etienne Tshisekedi, but the international community, and they've chosen Kabila.
They think that the West fixed the election.
Correct.
To keep Kabila in.
Yes. All I'm hearing is from my people on the phone is there were fraud, you need to report it, you need to accuse it. There were conspiracy, you need to report it, you need to accuse it.
Why do they think the West had the fix in?
Well, the West, like, what they're telling us is you live in a country of democracy. If you live in a country of democracy, and we do understand that Canada promotes democracy. Canada stands behind the values of justice, democracy, and peace, and human rights, right? But at the present time, Canada has spent a lot of money in order to contribute to the peace in Congo, to democracy in Congo. And that's why we had the election on November 28, 2011. Those elections were a hope for the Congolese people to finally finish with that corrupted government, a hope for them to finally end with that irresponsible government. But on November 28th, they expressed their voice through the fair election. Just Mrs. Vandenbeld said, the election were supposed to be fair and competitive.
Okay,
but yet again, they were not.
Thomas, South Africa said the election was generally okay. Is that your understanding of what happened?
I think there were problems, no doubt about it, but I am not too sure and wouldn't be confident enough to suggest that the elections, or I'll call it a stolen verdict necessarily, because we don't know who won the elections because there were a number of difficulties. The reason why I wouldn't be firm enough in calling Etienne Tshisekedi as the winner is that we tend to underestimate opposition parties, especially in the urban, because usually they are very popular in the urban centers. And usually they have the educated elites who are very articulate and they are able to voice their opinion. So if you base your analysis on these individuals in Kinshasa and the capital, you will think the opposition is going to win hands down. But once you move outside of the urban areas, then you see a different voice. So we don't really know who actually won the election.
Mikhail, what's your view on how other countries around the world have reacted to how clean or not that election was?
I think there's one thing is that we saw that most of the Western countries haven't really they sort of expressed their sort of reservations in terms of calling Kabila the winners. They've said that yes, there have been some irregularities, but the question here is that that once you say that, we have to go a little bit step further. And Canada, apparently, Canada is spending a lot of money sort of trying to build, to help Congo build strong institutions and everything. But if we want those institutions to be in place and then you want them to be, to have a leadership that is accountable, I think it's somehow we have to follow up. Just to say, okay, we know that there have been some, we're very extremely concerned, there have been some irregularities and we stop there. The question that we sort of expect them to go a little bit further than just saying that.
Okay. Eric, maybe you could weigh in at this point and tell us what you believe Canada ought to be doing at this stage, either to recognize the results of the election, decry them, tell the country they got to do elections again. Where should we be on this?
All right. Yeah, I did see in the polling booths, I saw that the opposition in Kinshasa was winning by a landslide, and that's not what was published. So therefore, I think the Canadian government should in no way approve the results of this election. And in fact, one Liberal MP, Jim Carey-Giannis, is circulating a petition to that effect, saying that we should not approve this election. It was too fraudulent. We cannot really say who won, but what we can say is that the results officially posted are not correct. There was planned and purposeful manipulation of the results. So one, don't approve of this, and two, say we will only approve a government that is genuinely elected and verified, is what Anita had previously said.
Okay, Anita, follow up on that if you would. We have to put this election in context. This is a country that has been in crisis, depending on how you want to count, for either 150 years, certainly the last many decades, 5 or 6 million people killed over the civil war that has taken place in the last decade and a half or so. Is it a miracle that they even had an election at all?
Well, I think that what you're describing is why it's even more important that this election be fair and credible and seen as legitimate. Because you do have a country where there has been a tremendous amount of suffering, violence, war, and what I saw there was that people there really perceived elections as the way that they could empower themselves, as the way that they could change things. And if, and you know, as our colleagues here said, if you don't know who won the election, that's not good enough. It wouldn't be good enough here in Canada. And for us to have a second standard and say, well, it's Africa, it's a country that has trouble anyway, so let's just let it be. I mean, to me, that is the worst thing we can do, because the next time in Congo or any other African country or country in the world where there's an election, we expect that people will use nonviolent mechanisms, they will use democracy, use those processes, and a lot of the young people are going to say, well, look what happened last time, and you risk that this is actually going to create more violence.
Ange, do you let them off the hook a little bit? Because after all, this is just the second election in 40 years, and they don't have a lot of experience at it, and it did happen.
It did. Just like I said, the election did happen, and that was our hope, to finally end up with a corrupted government, to finally end up with a responsible government, a government that is not producing anything for the Congo. You just said Congo is one of the richest countries in the world. You just said You said Congo is one of the richest countries in the world, and again, Congo is the worst country in the world in terms of richness. But then, if the soil of Congo, if we are rich in terms of natural resources, why will we be at the lowest level in the whole world? That's why we're calling on the government of Canada to reject that government. That's why we're calling on the mining company located here in Canada to not support that government. Because if they are supporting, if they are investing in Congo, they have, it's at their best interest not to support the government that is creating militias, a government that is forming an army against the people.
Okay, you've picked up on mining here, and I think let's go there now. And Eric, I want to bring you in at this point because although you're not an expert in mining, you are an engineer. Water is your background, but mining is often pointed to as the cause for so much of the grief in the DRC. And I want to get a better understanding for our viewers of how mining companies can operate in a country which has so little infrastructure to begin with and which seems perpetually in a state of chaos, horror, call it what you want. How does it actually work?
Yeah, well, mining is the big story here, especially for Canadians, because 70% of all the mining stocks in the world are on Canadian stock exchanges. Because we're so loosely regulated, even other countries come and put their stocks here. I've been 3 times in the eastern Congo, which is especially rich in minerals and especially violent in terms of violence against women especially, but all kinds of violence. And it's fueled by profits from mining. The National Resources Canada says that of the Canadian mining in Africa, which is huge, the DRC is either first or second in Canadian mining companies' priorities, and there's about 30 companies. There's between $5 and $6 billion of work going on there. So how does that fuel it? Well, I could say briefly, there's 3 kinds of mining. The majors like Barrick Gold and Banro, the miners who are looking for things, and then there's artisanal mining, which is very large in the Congo, and that's little
Stand by
people
1 second, Eric, on
hillsides
that, because we got a map to show some of this. Michael, I wonder if we could bring that up right now, because Eric is really laying it out very nicely, the different kinds of mining that are going on. There's the first map, reminding everybody where the DRC is, but then as we put the shaded areas in, you will see there are different kinds of mining. The artisan mining that takes place in the eastern part there, that's very ungovernable territory. The government has barely any influence over there. Rwanda, Burundi are occasionally having their soldiers come over there. These are people in open pit mines who are often captured, young kids who are, with hammers just doing mining. Then you've got some of the heavier mining that goes on in the other parts of the country as well. And you think, Eric, this is the source of so much of the misery. Have I got that right?
I've been told by people who live there that it is. They've seen the extraction of these minerals and they've seen the people left poor. And artisanal mining, almost, the more chaotic the situation is, the more they seem to like it because they can operate freely without regulations. That may not be so for the large-scale miners.
Thomas, follow up on that if you would.
Okay, I think he made a really good point that a well-functioning government is not actually good for mining companies, in the sense that you get...
Sorry, say that again?
A well-functioning state and government is not good for mining companies.
Is not good?
It's not good. Partly because a well-functioning state can negotiate with you and will get a better deal during the negotiation process. A very dysfunctional state hasn't got the capacity to be able to get the deal that is good for the country. And that's why if you look at the investment trend in Africa, usually DR Congo, Angola, and South Africa are usually the top investment destinations. These are, apart from South Africa, the 2 of them are the countries that are poorly governed. And part of the reason that they like it because the government hasn't got a capacity to be able to negotiate to get it.
But you've got to help me on this because I don't get that on the face of it. Surely it's better to have, I shouldn't say surely, isn't it better to have a stable government in place that can, control things, for lack of a better expression, where you don't have, build roads, where the people are not pillaged, where people have, safe mining operations in which to work. Wouldn't you prefer that?
No, in the sense that a better government would force you to be actually provide social services for the communities that you are taking the resources from. A better government will be able to work with you and then get a better deal. If you look at the contracts that DR Congo over the years, they've signed with the companies, terrible. And it's because they've never got, a well-functioning government. A better government also will be able, you would not be able to repatriate the sort of profit that you can repatriate if the government is not working. And if you look at the returns on investment in Africa, it's highest in the world. And partly because usually you're able to repatriate more profit because you are working with a very dysfunctional government. You can also bribe them.
Mikhail, would you agree that it is actually in the interest of everybody except the people to have a dysfunctional situation?
I would say, I could go back to what Eric said earlier in terms of when you look at the mining activity, we have different levels. When you talk about, let's say, junior mining companies, yes, it's not in their best interest to have a well-functioning government in place. But when you go to, we start talking about heavy, like a major mining company, when you talk about, for example, copper and cobalt extractions, you need an organization, you need infrastructure, you have to have a road, as you say, you have to have people report to work every morning. Those people have to be in good health. You see, when you look at the contrast between the Eastern Congo, where you have mostly the mine diamond, gold, and coltan and all things, and Katanga, where they mine copper and cobalt. Katanga is much more stable. It's well organized, and the school system seems to work much better because you need people who are skilled in order to work on the furnace and all those things. In that way, yes. And when you look at for example, the Katanga province has been making a lot of money in terms of taxes because all these companies have to pay taxes, which you do not have in Eastern Congo. Why? Because in Eastern Congo, all you need is just a gun and a few people.
Okay, but Anita, let me understand this. Clearly, there's a lot of money transferring here, and there are taxes being paid. Why is it, and I don't mean this to sound like a naive question, but why is it that virtually none of the revenue that seems to be realized from all of this mining is going into services for people?
I think what it comes down to is institutions. If you have strong institutions that can put a check on government, that can regulate, that can ensure that it's not the Wild West, that means you're cutting into profits. And so what you end up having, without any check on the public accounts, without any check on a strong parliament and other institutions, without a strong Supreme Court, strong police, what happens is it becomes in the interest of a politician, an elected official, to cut a deal and to say, I'm going to give you, if you build a few roads for me, you can do that, but later on, I'm going to get a cut of everything that you do, and you're going to have mining concessions for the next 100 years. And it becomes about self-interest and not about the interest of the whole. And that's why when you look at a country that is one of the richest countries in the world with the poorest people, this isn't about aid, this is about governance. At the bottom, it is about governance.
Eric, let me get your view on whether you think it's in everybody's interests except the people to keep this country as dysfunctional as it is.
Yeah, well, again, going back to the East, which is mineral rich and has the highest level of violence, there are so many rebel groups there. You can't keep track of them all. There's Tutsi-based, Hutu-based, Mai local-based, all kinds of individual rebel leaders, but all of them, how do they keep going? They all, I've been told by people who live there, control some mining area resource, and that's how they fuel their activities. So it's correct. The lack of government control there, which is happening, there is hardly any government control. In fact, a lot of the worst offenses have been committed by government soldiers, unpaid government soldiers. And coming back to Anita's, we have a governance where they're not even paying civil servants and not even paying soldiers enough, and therefore the violence goes on. And in that context, small artisanal minings are just draining this place. Mining Watch Canada says on the average, in these situations, the mining companies or activities take 70% of all the wealth out of the country, 30% goes to government and local elites, and the people are left unbelievably poor. This is not a good situation, and good governance would correct this, but that's going to be a long time in coming.
Well, Ange, let me follow up with this. And again, I don't mean this to sound like a naive question, but if things are this bad, and the people are being abused so deeply, why are there not more riots in the streets? Why are people not rising up?
Well, after the election, Joseph Kabila has brought in mercenaries in the country, mercenaries from all over the neighboring country.
Mercenaries?
Yes. So those mercenaries are there to keep a gun at the population.
So everybody's terrorized.
Correct. So, so in this situation, the population will not really have the courage to walk on the street, even if the population is unarmed, right? So that's the situation Kinshasa is in at the present time. That's the situation the whole country is in at the present time.
Okay,
and that's why we're marching on the street of Toronto and all over the world.
Okay, let me hear Anita and then Thomas on this.
Yeah, just in terms of what I saw, in the days before the election, they had these, they looked like tanks, but it was tanks with tear gas canisters and the people movers, you know, and they were taking 30 or 40 of these full of riot police and full riot gear and just parading around the streets. And the streets were almost empty. People were afraid to go outside. I was on the phone with some of my staff afterwards saying that there were actual tanks around the stadium in the neighborhood where the Etienne Tshisekedi lives.
The opposition leader.
The opposition leader. Even my own staff member, the day before the election, she was walking home from church. She lived in an opposition stronghold, and she went into a little boutique to buy milk. And all of a sudden, the head of the person who owned it said, "Close the doors." Les robots, the robo-cops, what they call the riot police, were outside. And one little boy opened the window, and they threw tear gas into the store, forcing everybody out. And then they robbed her jewelry, her cell phone, her purse. The next day, her father said, "You know what, it's too dangerous, don't go vote, because it's too dangerous to go outside." So it's become almost a ghost town. And I think this is sustainable to a point, but there's still a lot of hope that there will be justice. I think one of the reasons we haven't seen the violence is because the opposition leaders, you know, there might be some inflammatory language, but they've gone short of saying use violence. And this is a very important thing, because this is what those of us who were working with the opposition were saying: do not incite, do not use violence. The rest of the world will do something. We are listening, and we believe in justice.
So they're depending on us.
Absolutely. And I can say honestly,
Is that false hope?
I was in Washington for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearings, and I was talking aside with some of the decision makers in Washington, and one of them actually said, "You know, we thought maybe there was going to be a whole bunch of rioting and violence, but it hasn't happened yet, so maybe we just let it be." And I said, this is exactly the problem. We tell people, use the institutions, use democratic processes. Then we admit that those processes are flawed, and then we say, yeah, but they're not in the streets, so let's just let it be.
Thomas.
Let me bring in another factor why you don't see protests mostly across the African continent and DR Congo is because President Kabila is using a formula that has been used elsewhere, and that is that if you can, there are two institutions that can mobilize on the African continent, DR Congo in particular: student groups and labor unions. If you can infiltrate and ensure that you've got your men and women in those institutions, difficult for anyone to be able to mobilize and then be on the street. And what President Kabila has done is to be able to infiltrate and at the moment control a number of labor groups and also controlling student movement. If you have those two, difficult for you to mobilize. And in the absence of a large middle class, difficult for farmers and others to come to the street. And that's part of the reason why it will be difficult for us to see mass mobilization.
Eric, help us with this, though. We are seeing all over the world populations in countries where they don't have democracy, where the populations have been abused over the years. Take a look at the Middle East right now. Take a look at Russia. You know, people do go into the streets. People mass by the hundreds of thousands. It is happening, even in Syria, where they're being gunned down as they stand. Why is it not happening in Congo?
Why isn't the Arab Spring occurring in sub-Saharan Africa? Apparently intimidation works down there. One thing is the educational level is very low. People suspect been kept purposely low. The average educational level is 3.5 years. There is no government paid free education, primary education in all of the Congo. And also, but the people are very smart. They still know what's going on. They started to text message all over the place, and 5 days after, when the government realized they were all text messaging the results that they knew, they canceled all text messaging and told the cell phone companies don't do it. So they're very good. Intimidation works so far. And there's a picture of the Kabila Victory Parade, which illustrates this by a news service. The main street, totally like a ghost town, 2 people carrying the picture of Kabila. That is Victory Parade. Everybody's afraid and in their houses. So for now it works, but it won't always be working like that.
Eric, I'm told we're going to lose our satellite to Ottawa in just a few minutes, so let me get one more question and answer to you, and then we'll thank you for joining us tonight. And that question is this. I mentioned earlier that it seems as if the people are really pinning their hopes on the rest of the world somehow intervening to come to their assistance. How should we do that?
Yes, I think that's true. I heard a number of Congolese saying that the West could change this. They've changed it in other countries. How can we do it? It must probably be through our mining companies. There are responsible mining companies. They believe in corporate social responsibility. They have quite a lot of influence in the Congo. We ought to exert some regulations on those. We tried with Bill C-300. It failed. There's an avenue, and certainly don't approve and don't give Canadian recognition to this election. And this is a small step in a long struggle.
That was a private member's bill brought up in the last Parliament by a Liberal backbencher. I mean, you're in Ottawa right now. Do you see any efforts to try to reconstitute that legislative process?
Unfortunately, not with this present government, which is very pro-business. I think business is good, but business is not a good god. And they're not thinking that it would pass with this present government. But it's certainly, hopefully its day will come later on. Understood.
Eric Schiller, the retired University of Ottawa professor, we do thank you very much for being there on the line from the nation's capital for us. Take care, sir.
Thanks so much for letting me be with you.
Not at all. It was our pleasure. All right, let's continue our discussion here. And I guess I should start this part of our discussion by saying if there are parents at home with young children near the television set, you might want to take this opportunity because we're going to have a very tough discussion here about one of the most horrific crimes that happens in the Congo with all too much regularity. You may want to take this opportunity to get them away from the TV because this is going to be a tough discussion. I want to read this excerpt from the New York Times from last year. A new study in the American Journal of Public Health estimates that nearly 2 million women have been raped in the Democratic Republic of Congo, with women victimized at a rate of nearly 1 every minute. The study, one of the first comprehensive looks at the prevalence of rape in Congo, indicates that the problem is much bigger and more pervasive than previously thought. Women have reported alarming levels of sexual abuse in the capital and in provinces far from Congo's war-torn east, a sign that the problem extends beyond the nation's primary conflict zone. Okay, Ange, rape as a tool of warfare is not a new thing in the Congo, and it's getting a lot of attention in the media lately. And I guess I want to start our discussion here by asking why, in the 21st century, is this still happening with so much regularity?
I'm just going to answer by saying Congo is, the rape rate in Congo is worse than what we had in Bosnia, what we have in Afghanistan, what we have in all over the country in the world. Congo, you just give me a number, a big number. But again, it's not okay when just one woman gets raped. That's too much already. That's enough for an institution, that's enough for a government, a responsible government to take action already. I'll give you an example. Imagine you do go home right now after the show, you do go home. You learn or you witness your wife, your children being raped. What would you do? This is a question I'm asking not only to you, but to all the members of all over Canada.
Let me see if I can help you with this.
Yes.
The Western reaction would be to lash out at the perpetrator and try to bring him to justice. My understanding is in the Congo, when that happens to your family, they are now damaged goods.
Correct. And it's okay. It goes on and on and on without punishment. It goes on and on and on. Rape in Congo has become a matter of habit. I want it, I will get it. It's at gunpoint. You have to do it. It becomes an everyday situation. Women, a CNN journalist said, She was gone to the eastern RDC Congo. She asked the women up there, would you like to be at home, to stay at home, or come to the field? The women answer as saying, we rather go to the field and get raped, knowing that we will get raped, than staying at home and die being hungry.
What an awful choice.
That is the choice of the women in Congo at the present time. So it's not okay. That's why we say there's lack of democracy, there's lack of justice, there's lack of human rights, and Canada needs to reject that government. The mining company need to support, not to support that government because it's corrupted.
Mikhail.
Yes, I think I'll just go in the same directions. They say that, yes, when you look at, you mentioned that, yes, the Canadian would react to this by saying that, okay, let's, by saying that we should take the perpetrator, bring them to justice. But do we have justice in the Congo? Do we have a judicial system? Who is it? And again, this goes back to the question of leadership. Do you have a leadership that is accountable? No. And when we go to the Department of Foreign Affairs website, they say, yes, Canada is spending a lot of money trying to build a strong institutions, and especially to help, especially in the Eastern Congo.
I hear you, Mikhail, but the difference is, even if there were not a good justice system in Canada, if that happened here, we'd still want to wreak havoc on the person who did it. We wouldn't be blaming the victim. In the Congo, from what I've read, it seems that once your wife is raped, you don't want to have anything to do with your wife anymore. Why that attitude?
Again, I don't know if that's really true, because I think there are
I've read it everywhere.
Yes, it's true that yes, there are some cases, yes, women victims of rape have been ostracized. And yes, but I don't think it's just a family rejecting. Because how many street children you have in the Congo? How many single women you have out there? When you don't have the mechanism in place, for example, you don't have social services. Who's going to take care of all those things? It doesn't mean that, oh, you know, these Africans, that's the way they are. If your wife gets raped, you just have you kick her out. I think that's it's sort of simplifying it, and then I don't think that there are many people being taken care of by the communities. My point here, as I was trying to say here, is that when you look at you have the government has the military, the police in Kinshasa patrolling, trying to keep people off the street. Why not take the military, take them to the east and go and fight against the Rwandan rebels, the various military, even its own military raping women there? Is the police, now what we have, the army and the police is more the instruments of the leadership that you have in place in order to stay in power than going to fight and not try to keep peace.
You've asked a good question. Let me see if I can get Thomas to answer it. Why has there not been an edict from the top that says to the military in the Congo, this is not acceptable anymore?
I think it's really difficult to tackle this issue using the military to do it. I think it has to be public institutional approach to it. But let me step back a little bit and see if I'll be able to provide a little bit of explanation as to why women are ostracized within the Congolese. Remember that prior to the phenomena of rape being used as a tool of warfare, rape was seen as, there were a number of taboos around rape. That a woman who is raped in DR Congo, for example, is seen as, the person is defiled and so and so. And the reason why they are using it is because the rebels have realized that is one instrument that you can psychologically damage your opponent. Psychologically, you can force people to leave the land so that if you want to mine, you can mine, right? This is also an instrument that you can also use to inflict damage on your opponent, and that's why they are using it as a tool. And part of the reason why, so the old culture of making sure that there's strong taboo around rape is still present, and you have this particular phenomenon. That's why women are being ostracized. That's part and parcel of the system. Why is the government not taking action? I think it's difficult for the government itself to do that because there's what the UN report described as criminal cartels made up of rebel groups sponsored by Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, who are at the moment seriously mining and taking most of the minerals. If you are going to make around 250 million within 6 months from only cotton, for example, when you don't actually produce it at home. Why wouldn't you want to support it? And you see shipment going on, and they're using that particular instrument to move people off their land so that they'll be able to mine. And that's why rape is so high in the Congo.
Anita, what can you add to our understanding of this?
Well, I think on this issue about people taking action, what I saw was that they were taking action.
Who was?
Women, the candidates that I was working with, that we were training, a lot of these women were raped themselves. And they said, we are going to try to get elected, get into decision making, and do something about it. And we owe it to those women to make sure that those elections, where they risked a lot, they risked their family's safety, they risked their own safety. It was a tremendous security risk running for office. And I think we owe it to those women to make sure that when they do decide that they're going to take action and run in elections, that the results are going to be fair. And I think that this notion of the women as victims, I think too many people focus on the Congo, they focus on the issue of rape, and they say, let's go and help these victims, and we build clinics, and I mean, this is a good thing. But what we should be doing is stopping it. And the way you stop it is rule of law. You end the impunity, you make sure people...
That's one way to end it. The West made a decision in Libya to end it a different way. The West made a decision to intervene militarily and kill, I mean, this wasn't an expressly stated part of the mission, but in essence it was to remove the dictator, Gaddafi. He ended up being killed, and put something else in place. Would you like to see that happen here, Mikhail? Should the West intervene, kill Kabila, and get somebody else in power?
Whatever, I think it's all I can say that we want strong institutions. We want institutions. We want a leadership that is accountable.
That's not what I'm asking you.
Yes.
I'm asking you whether you want military intervention that would overthrow the government.
I don't think that should be a way, but if they have to strengthen the local institution, the military, whatever, they could take care of themselves, they will do it, but not create another
Thomas,
situation.
what about that?
Actually, there's a very simple way around it, and the simple way is that the UN actually identified the problem of the Congo, which is what they call it, armies of business. If you can stop it, then you would, because it's these armies of business who are actually supporting and building and then supporting this government. So if you can come out with proper legislation, UN-backed legislation, international and at the domestic level, to stop these armies of business, then the government, whoever is there, would set up and then respond to the needs of the people. Unless we are able to stop it, I don't think that anything can happen.
Ange?
The mining company in Canada have made a revenue of more than $6 billion from 1996 up until 2011. That's why when we consider that, when we look at that, we tell the government of Canada, and you can see people marching all over the world, all over the city of Toronto, marching to tell the government of Canada, please come alongside with us to rejecting. We don't know what strategy they will take in order to end this corrupted government. But please reject the legitimacy of this government because it's illegitimate. There's no validity in this government. I'm
down to my 30 seconds. Last 30 seconds here, Anita. You know, when the West decides that your time is up, Hosni Mubarak, Muammar Gaddafi, you know, Ben Ali in Tunisia, they go. How about here?
I think in this case we need to see the real will of the Congolese people. It's the kind of situation, it's not the West that perpetrated the fraud, and I think it's very important that we know it was not the international community that committed the fraud. It was the willful looking away and underestimating the strength of the opinion of the Congolese people. So the solution would be to allow the Congolese people to have institutions that really reflect their will.
Okay. I want to thank all of you for coming in today and helping us with this discussion. Mikhail Misakabo on the right-hand side of the table from Pamoja. Ange Kalenga, World Hub, Wheel of Women Leaders That Care. Thank you, too, for being over there. On the other side, Thomas Kwazi Tieku at CG and the University of Toronto, and Anita Vandenbeld, formerly with the National Democratic Institute. Thanks so much, everybody. Appreciate your time tonight.